Don always considered his marriage to Brenda to be solid, until he found out about her secret affair with a colleague. When the truth came out, his world collapsed. Joining forces with his lover's wife, Don develops a plan for exposure.
It was a typical spring afternoon at Arman and Associates, the insurance agency where Don was employed. 5 years earlier, he had left a larger firm where a 60-hour workweek was considered light. His current position was much more relaxed, yet the agency's solid reputation ensured a steady flow of clients, providing a comfortable life for Don and his family. The office was small, consisting of 5 brokers and 10 support staff. Don had been a broker there for nearly 4 years and enjoyed his role. In his early years in the insurance industry, he had learned the ropes and discovered his knack for communicating with people. He particularly valued not having to use high-pressure sales techniques. Customers needed auto and home insurance, and as long as his company offered competitive rates, the policies practically sold themselves. It was the strong relationships that kept Don's clients returning. People appreciated Don's easygoing manner. He invested a lot of time in staying connected with clients and ensuring his company met their needs. Although Don spent much of his day on the phone, the call he received that afternoon was unusual. A woman who identified herself only as Terry had contacted him, requesting a meeting. Don was more than willing to meet a potential new client and invited her to visit the office. "I'm not looking to purchase insurance, Mr. Primack, but I do need to meet with you. You don't know me, but I have information you need to see," she stated. Don began to ask questions, but Terry remained tight-lipped. "This is a personal matter. It's not about business, and I'm not selling anything. Could you please just meet with me for a few minutes this afternoon?" Don found the request odd, possibly even risky, but the call had piqued his interest. He frequently met and networked with various people and had experienced many strange encounters over the years. This Terry seemed articulate and sincere. Although she was withholding details, he thought, "I need to go and find out what this is about." The coffee shop was one of those local spots, not your standard franchise. Designed for lounging and chatting with a friend or two, it featured mostly plush, oversized chairs, though there were a few tables and chairs available for those needing to work. It was late afternoon, and the cafe was largely empty. 3 students were at the tables, surrounded by books, papers, and laptops, their heads down in concentration, paying no attention as Don entered. He paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room for Terry. Terry had mentioned she'd be wearing a green shirt, making her easy to spot in a distant corner among the comfy chairs. Don approached her and said, "Hi, I'm Don Primack," extending his hand for a brief shake. "Hello, I'm Terry Dixon," she replied with a faint smile. "Would you like to have a coffee before we begin?" "No, thank you. I'm short on time," Don responded, prepared for a swift departure if needed. He disliked pushy sales approaches, but was adept at managing conversations, ensuring there was always an easy way out to keep both parties comfortable if things needed to end quickly. "Have we met before, Ms. Dixon?" he asked, even though they had already confirmed this during their prior phone call. It was his way of encouraging Terry to open up. "No, we haven't," Terry answered, omitting further details. Don noticed her nervousness. He took a seat in a nearby chair opposite Terry. "All right, I'm interested. What's the purpose of our meeting today? Your call was quite vague. How can I assist you?" Though unfamiliar with Terry, Don could tell she was uneasy. Her eyes lingered on his, seemingly trying to understand him without words. Don offered a reassuring smile to ease her tension. "I don't need anything, Mr. Primack, but I do have some information you should see. We don't know each other, and I don't think we've ever met, but our spouses both work at Davin Construction." There was a brief pause as Terry and Don exchanged glances. Don felt uncertain about the direction of the conversation, sensing something troubling in Terry's expression, perhaps worry or fear, which made him uneasy. They continued to look at each other, both attempting to relax the slightly strained atmosphere. Terry began to speak, but hesitated, searching for the right words. Then she became more assertive. "I'll get straight to the point, Mr. Primack. I have some bad news. I brought you here to show you the evidence I obtained from a private investigation firm I recently hired." She paused, allowing Don a moment to process this information. Don's initial unease shifted to apprehension. What had started as a curious discussion now felt ominous. His mind raced, anticipating unwelcome outcomes. He looked into Terry's eyes, trying to discern her thoughts before she spoke. While he couldn't read her words, her sorrow was unmistakable. "What kind of evidence?" Don finally asked. "As I mentioned, I know your wife works at Davin Construction, and my husband is a VP of marketing there. I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife and my husband are having an affair." The room seemed to close in around Don. Although he could still see, his surroundings blurred as his brain struggled to process the revelation. Brenda cheating? For a few moments, his vision was blank, unable to register incoming information. After a brief lapse, his thoughts began to function again. He looked up at Terry, seeking some form of guidance, but saw only her sadness. Don felt incapable of continuing the conversation, unsure of how to respond. When Terry first reviewed the PI report, it had devastated her. Now, witnessing Don's anguish and confusion, her heart ached even more. Terry remained silent for about a minute, giving Don time to absorb the shocking news. "What do you mean an affair?" Don finally asked. "What exactly have they been doing? For how long?" "The private investigation firm I hired believes the affair has been ongoing for about a year. They gathered information from a few Davin Construction employees who work with George and Brenda." Don realized Terry knew his wife's name, intensifying the knot in his stomach. "It appears they take extended lunches at least one afternoon each week. The investigator quickly determined they've been visiting a nearby hotel." Terry retrieved an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "Everything is in here," she said. "I don't have explicit photos of them together, but we do have audio recordings of them being intimate. There are also phone calls, text messages, and email evidence. My PI service was very thorough." "Oh my God," Don whispered. This was all happening too quickly and felt overwhelmingly real. Earlier, he hadn't been sure about the purpose of meeting Terry, but he certainly hadn't anticipated this. He sat silently, staring at the envelope bearing the name Howard Investigative Service. He imagined its contents, but couldn't bring himself to reach for it. Terry noticed his fixation on the envelope. "It's all in there," she reiterated softly. Don was at a loss for words. He didn't know how to proceed, but Terry's serious demeanor and evident sadness convinced him the information was genuine. He couldn't fathom that his wife would betray him and that the affair had been going on for so long. Finally, he voiced his frustration. "For a year or more? How did I not notice? There must have been signs." His words were more to himself than to Terry. "I understand. I didn't suspect George either. We've always been very close. I was as shocked as you are, Mr. Primack. I only had him investigated because someone at Davin Construction sent me an anonymous email." "Please, call me Don. Can I call you Terry? It seems we have something in common." "All right, Don. I plan to confront George tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear this first. I'm sure your wife will find out they've been exposed shortly after I speak with George." Her words took Don by surprise. "Tomorrow?" Why not tomorrow? Can you wait a day or two and give me some time to sort myself out? I need to absorb all of this. I'm uncertain about my next steps and need some time to think. Could you please delay it for a day or two? All right, Don. I can hold off for a few days. After all, I've been aware or at least suspicious for weeks, but I don't want to wait indefinitely. The investigators mentioned that the lovers are planning a trip together in a couple of weeks. I refuse to let them go away like a pair of lovebirds. Oh, wow. That must be the conference Brenda has been mentioning for the past month. When is it? I'm not sure if there's an actual conference, but the private investigators said they've booked a 4-day adult cruise starting on the 14th of this month. Dawn remained stunned. How could she do this? We have 2 young children? Terry handed an envelope to Dawn. This is your copy, Dawn. Fair warning, it's hard to read. It feels like a dagger to the heart when you realize someone you love is so deceitful and harmful. I'm truly sorry to bring you this news. I've written my cell number on the envelope. Call me after you've had some time to think. Terry seems so calm, Dawn mused, realizing she had known for some time. He had just learned this terrible news, but already understood that if it was true, his marriage was over. Thank you, Terry. I'll call you soon. Please give me some time to process all of this. Since I'm asking you to delay your conversation with George, I won't confront Brenda until I inform you that I am. I just don't know what to do right now. I need to make some plans. Dawn, I'm furious with George for ruining our lives. Right now you're in shock, but trust me, your feelings will soon turn to anger. I don't know how you intend to handle this, but I won't stay married to a man who cheats on me. I'm so angry. I want to make him pay. I'd love to get back at that selfish, unfaithful bastard. I just can't figure out how to do it. I suppose I'll just confront him and then divorce him, and he probably won't care. He and Brenda will likely disappear together while you and I are left behind. If you have any ideas on how to make them pay, please let me know. Maybe we can email their colleagues. Perhaps we could use the investigative firm to gather more information. I'm not sure what would work. I still have the investigative firm on retainer. Make them pay? Dawn replied thoughtfully, gazing out across the coffee shop. Yeah, maybe I can think of something, Terry. I'll consider it. It's also confusing. I just don't know right now. I'm sorry I delivered such bad news today, Dawn, Terry said as she stood up. Call me if you need anything. We'll talk soon. Terry left the coffee shop, and Dawn remained seated for a moment, watching the students work. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Dawn thought. He stared at the envelope. Looking at its contents was the last thing he wanted to do, but he knew it was a necessary step forward. His future depended on that envelope. He reached across the table and began pulling out the papers, laughing without humor at the irony of the situation. I look like I'm doing homework like everyone else here, he thought. But I have a feeling this homework is definitely going to change my life. His mind drifted to his children. This situation was going to shatter their lives. It was then that he fully comprehended that if Terry was telling the truth and the envelope confirmed Brenda's affair, a divorce was unavoidable. He couldn't imagine staying with a wife who was unfaithful. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. In fact, until today, Dawn believed their marriage was quite good. However, it clearly wasn't working for Brenda. She didn't respect him enough to communicate or even leave him for her lover. Dawn pondered his role in Brenda's infidelity. Was their intimacy, life, lacking? Had he neglected her other needs? Dawn had left work early, and since Brenda wouldn't expect him home for a few more hours, he sat quietly and read the report with all its disturbing details. It took him nearly 2 hours to digest everything. The report was filled with extensive information that seemed unbelievable. There was a thumb drive containing recorded calls, which had been transcribed into documents, along with numerous photos of Brenda and her lover holding hands and kissing. There were also pictures of them entering and exiting hotels. The entire situation made Don feel nauseous. He scanned the room for the restroom, fearing he might need to vomit. By the time he finished reading, everything was crystal clear. Brenda wasn't a loving and caring wife and mother. She didn't prioritize her family's well-being. Instead, she was a selfish, deceitful, and unfaithful woman who had been cheating for over a year. Not only did she meet her lover at least once a week, but they had also been together during 2 business trips. Don had believed he knew Brenda almost as well as she knew herself, but in reality, he had no idea who this other person was. 7 years ago, Don and Brenda first met shortly after college. They both worked for a tech company that provided inventory management services to large enterprises. Don began his career as an assistant product manager, working on one of the company's many service areas. Brenda had been with the company for about a year, working in the accounting department. Their first encounter was at the company's holiday party in late December, a formal event held downtown. "Brenda, you look fantastic all dressed up," Natalie remarked. Natalie was one of the many friends Brenda had made at Davin Construction. She and 5 other girls had decided to attend the party together. "Thanks, Nat. I do enjoy dressing up every now and then," Brenda replied. "You clean up nicely, Bren. That red dress is stunning on you and highlights your curves perfectly. The guys are going to be all over you tonight," Nat said with a wink. Brenda wasn't sure many men would be paying attention to her, but she wasn't opposed to it. She didn't usually go out of her way to attract men. With her straight light brown hair and brown eyes, Brenda thought her face was attractive enough, but she always felt a bit plump and didn't have the figure that seemed to attract men. Standing at 5'4", she wasn't as tall as Natalie, and men seemed to prefer the more statuesque girls. Additionally, she didn't spend as much time on her hair and makeup as her friends did. Brenda preferred to focus on her work and enjoy outings with friends on weekends. She was very sociable, but wasn't the flashy, intimacy type like many in her group. When they went to bars and clubs, it often seemed that men were more interested in the other girls in her circle. Occasionally, when men were flirting with Brenda's friends, she would connect with one of them. More than once, she'd ended up spending the night with a guy. She wasn't shy and enjoyed the intimacy experiences, but they never seemed to develop into anything more meaningful. Sometimes she felt like the consolation prize in her friends' hookups with men. However, at the holiday party, Brenda caught Dawn's attention. She looked so unassuming standing with her friends, wearing a mid-length red dress adorned with white lace. To Dawn, she was the most beautiful in the group, and he wanted to meet her. Brenda noticed Dawn approaching their group. He was one of many men who had come over to ask for dances. She assumed he would soon be asking Natalie or Teresa for a dance, but as he drew closer, he was staring directly at her. "Would you like to dance?" Dawn asked Brenda, gazing into her eyes. Brenda was pleasantly surprised and agreed. After their dance ended, Dawn invited her to stay on the dance floor for another one. Soon, they had been dancing together for over an hour. "You are a beautiful woman, and I'd like to get to know you better," Dawn said to her. "Can I have your number so I can call you sometime?" Brenda smiled and nodded. They returned to the table, and Dawn handed Brenda his phone. "Send a text to your phone so I have your number." Once she did, Dawn looked into her eyes, smiled, nodded, and walked away. "Nice one," Natalie exclaimed, looking at Brenda and winking. Over the next few days, Brenda found herself constantly thinking about Dawn. At the party, he had been exceptionally kind and attentive. Since he had her phone number, she began to wonder if he might reach out. "I won't get my hopes up," she reassured herself, remembering how many times she had hoped a guy would call only to be let down. Then, on Monday evening, Brenda was thrilled when Dawn called her to invite her to a movie on Friday. Their Friday movie date went perfectly, and soon they were spending most of their free time together. Dawn quickly developed strong feelings for her, and Brenda cherished the attention. She wasn't used to receiving so much focus from a man. He was infatuated and courted her with flowers and candy. Throughout their relationship, he always made an effort to make each date special. Brenda loved being pampered, and he was gradually winning her heart. Sometimes even nerds get lucky, Don thought to himself. Brenda enjoyed being spoiled and eagerly shared stories about him with all her friends. With a large circle of friends and frequent Facebook posts, she wrote, "He's a romantic," followed by, "He's a keeper, Brenda. Men like him don't come around every day." After a particularly wonderful date, Brenda came home and lay down on her bed, still fully dressed. The evening had been amazing, leaving her in a state of euphoria. She hadn't felt this way since her first love in high school. "I've found a man who makes me feel special. I didn't realize men still acted like this." Don would hold her hand when they were out and always opened doors for her. He consistently showed her subtle public displays of affection, like a gentle kiss on her cheek that made her heart flutter. Brenda realized she was falling for him quickly. It felt like she was being swept off her feet, and she loved every moment of it. Being in love was an incredible feeling. Don and Brenda had been dating for roughly a month and continued to spend most of their free time together. This Friday evening was no different, except that Don had a special plan in mind. "Where are we headed tonight?" Brenda inquired. "You'll see, it's a surprise," he replied as they drove into the city. Brenda was curious. Eventually, Don began to circle around, clearly searching for a parking spot. "There's plenty of spots over there," Brenda suggested. After a few minutes, they arrived in front of a nightclub. The sign outside announced that Blue October was performing. "Oh my gosh, Don, how did you know I'm such a huge fan of Blue October?" He grinned broadly as he spoke. "I noticed them among your favorites on your Facebook page, of course." She gave Don a warm smile. "Thank you, Don. I don't know how to repay you." She then paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "Actually, I have an idea, but it'll have to wait until later tonight." Brenda was now the one smiling widely. Blue October exceeded her expectations, and they left the club after a fantastic evening. Later, as they entered Brenda's home, they shared a tender kiss at the doorway. Brenda wasn't usually one to rush things, but she felt a special connection with Don. His patience and thoughtfulness had won her over. Their kisses deepened, conveying their growing affection for each other. The evening was filled with laughter and heartfelt moments. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, finding comfort in each other's presence. Brenda appreciated Don's ability to listen and his genuine interest in her thoughts. For the first time in a while, she felt understood and cared for. As the night wore on, they both felt a sense of something deeper developing. Brenda, though usually cautious, realized she could trust Don with her vulnerabilities. They ended the evening with a heartfelt hug and a promise to see each other again soon. It was clear this was the beginning of something meaningful. They held a modest wedding ceremony, surrounded by a large group of friends and family. In addition to her relatives, all of Brenda's friends were present, creating a substantial gathering. In the months that followed, Brenda was overjoyed and cherished their married life. She frequently took Don to various events and parties, sharing numerous photos of their outings and adventures. Brenda enjoyed keeping everyone informed about the small moments in their lives. She appeared very proud of her husband, which made Don feel special. He sometimes wondered if others were genuinely interested in the details of their lives, but her social media posts consistently received many positive reactions. Don appreciated how proud she seemed of their relationship and their lives together. Present time. Terry had just returned from her meeting with Don and was relaxing in the living room of her and George's spacious home. The room featured a vaulted ceiling and a large fireplace along the back wall. Terry had lit the gas logs and was gazing at the flames, reflecting on their lives. With 4 large bedrooms, a family room, and an exercise room, the house now felt overwhelming since the children had moved out. She had been considering discussing a move with George, feeling they needed a change in their lives and routines. But now, change was inevitable. George couldn't control himself, and now they're both going to face the consequences, Terry thought. George and Terry had been married for 26 years, with 2 grown children and 2 young grandchildren. Their families had been close friends for years, having known each other since grade school. Shortly after earning his MBA, George returned home to visit family. He had worked diligently for 6 consecutive years and now had the degree to show for it. As a young man, he felt confident and ready to embrace the opportunities the world had to offer. George's parents were extremely proud of their son and were hosting a graduation party for him. The event was held outdoors in their large backyard, complete with a caterer and all the necessary arrangements. Terry was happy to attend with her parents. She hadn't seen George for years, but had always liked him when they were young. Terry had been much younger than him at the time, but he had always been kind and friendly toward her. She remembered him telling her she would grow up to be confident and poised, which had stuck with her over the years. At that time, she was only 19, and George was 26. When they first entered the backyard, George recognized her. Although he barely recognized the young woman standing there with her parents, he knew it was Terry. She had indeed grown into a confident young woman, tall, blonde, and graceful. As she was greeted by George's parents, her poise was evident. George noticed her maturity and decided to approach his parents. George looked directly into her eyes and said, "Wow, look at you, all grown up." He began asking her about what she had been up to as both sets of parents walked away. It was clear they needed to catch up, and the parents could sense their interest in reconnecting. After their initial conversation, they mingled separately with other friends, but kept returning to each other. Each time, George had a question or comment ready, giving him a reason to approach her again. At the party, Terry was impressed by George. She noticed he was giving her special attention throughout the evening. Even if they were just reconnecting as friends, she admired his accomplishments. It was evident he had worked hard to earn his degrees, and from what he had shared, he had secured a promising job in the San Francisco area. Later, George saw Terry and her parents speaking with his parents near the gate as they were saying their goodbyes. He approached them and stood beside Terry, quietly thanking her for coming. "It was great seeing you again. I would love it if we could spend more time together. Would you be open to having dinner tomorrow night?" Terry smiled and looked him straight in the eyes, wanting him to know she appreciated his invitation. "Sure, that would be great, George." Over the subsequent 2 weeks, they went on several dates. George clearly expressed his strong feelings for Terry, and although they shared a kiss at the end of each date, on their last night together, they spent about 15 minutes kissing in his car as he was dropping her off. He said, "Terry, I'm moving to San Francisco, but I won't forget about you. If you're open to a long-distance relationship, I'd like to continue dating you in some way. I believe we can make it work." They succeeded in maintaining their relationship, nurturing their romance online for the next year before deciding to commit permanently. 18 months later, they had a large wedding, and Terry relocated to the West to be with George. 26 years into their marriage, things had evolved. In the early years, they worked as a team raising their children, with George advancing in his career and Terry managing the household. With the kids grown and out of the house, the dynamic shifted. The strong family teamwork they once had seemed to fade. Additionally, George, who had always prioritized his career, realized he might not ascend beyond the vice president level. He struggled with modern technology, feeling out of his depth as younger generations became more tech-savvy, often feeling like they were speaking a foreign language. George and Brenda had collaborated intermittently since she joined Davin Construction. George held the position of vice president of marketing and was well established within the company. Brenda worked in the finance department and served as a vendor partnership manager. Their roles often intersected when marketing collaborated with vendors, bringing Brenda and George together for various meetings. Brenda was always cheerful and talkative, which George found enjoyable and a reason to flirt with her. Typically, he didn't engage in flirting with his female colleagues, doubting that many would reciprocate. However, Brenda was different. They genuinely connected well. In the last few months, they had lunch together several times, usually with other colleagues, but occasionally just the two of them. Lately, George began complimenting her attire and hair. Brenda had been making an effort to dress more stylishly and had started wearing some makeup. Brenda noticed George's increased attention and recognized his attraction. It felt gratifying to be desired by a man, especially someone as attractive as George. She sometimes found herself thinking about him and even wondered about his intimacy, reassuring herself that harmless daydreaming was natural. One Wednesday during the daily morning meeting, George approached her. "Brenda, Greg mentioned you're discussing a partnership deal with Ace Construction. I'm meeting with them on Friday about a project and would like to learn more about your connections." Brenda responded with a smile. "I'm really busy tomorrow morning, but I should be able to meet with you later in the afternoon. Would 4 p.m. work?" "Sorry, Brenda, but I'm in meetings all afternoon," George replied, seizing the chance to get closer. He then asked, "Would you be available for dinner tomorrow night? We could enjoy a nice meal and talk about the Ace partnership. I promise to take you to a great place," he added with a broad smile. Brenda sensed that George had ulterior motives beyond the project. She felt a bit flustered at the idea of having dinner with him. Choosing to playfully tease him, she said, "George, I'm a married woman. I can't go out with you." It was clear she was joking. "I promise to be a gentleman, at least during dinner," he responded with a wink. Brenda knew she shouldn't be flirting with a married man like George. However, since it was just dinner, she reasoned, what harm could it do? "If you need more information about Ace, then I suppose dinner is okay," she replied casually. "As long as you're taking me somewhere nice," she added with a wink. The following morning, Brenda paid extra attention to her appearance, carefully selecting her clothes and applying light makeup. Although Brenda had no intentions of anything more than enjoying an evening out with George, she appreciated feeling confident and presentable. As dinner began, Brenda felt a slight pang of guilt. They were dining at an upscale restaurant, and she was accompanied by a man who had been friendly and engaging for months. It felt like stepping out of bounds. However, she reminded herself that it was just dinner. George was a gentleman, polite, intelligent, and easy to converse with. Gradually, Brenda relaxed and began to enjoy their time together. "Brenda, you look stunning tonight," George said with a warm smile. Brenda blushed and replied, "Thank you, George." Their conversation flowed effortlessly. Brenda was struck by how easy it was to talk to George and noticed a spark she hadn't felt in years. She reminded herself to keep the evening friendly and professional, despite the occasional thrill she felt from his compliments and attention. In the following weeks, George and Brenda's interactions at work grew more frequent. It was clear George enjoyed her company, and Brenda couldn't deny she looked forward to their conversations. About a month after their first dinner, George approached her desk. "Brenda, would you like to have dinner again sometime?" he asked, his tone casual but hopeful. Brenda felt a flutter of excitement but kept her composure. "Sure, George. That sounds nice." During their second dinner, George was once again charming and attentive. They discovered shared hobbies and interests, laughing over anecdotes and enjoying each other's company. For Brenda, it was refreshing to feel so appreciated and noticed. However, she reminded herself of her boundaries, staying firm in her commitment to keep things platonic. As time went on, Brenda found herself reflecting on her relationship with George. The connection they shared was undeniable, but she loved her husband, Don, and their 2 children. Balancing these feelings was challenging, but Brenda resolved to maintain discretion and clarity in her actions. George, too, seemed content with their dynamic, often going out of his way to ensure their conversations and interactions remained private. Their relationship was confined to moments of camaraderie and mutual respect without crossing into inappropriate territory. Brenda focused on cherishing the excitement of being seen and valued without compromising her principles or responsibilities. Eventually, George suggested attending a work-related event together, a conference in a different city. Brenda was hesitant, but saw no harm in accompanying a colleague for professional purposes. The trip went smoothly, with both maintaining a respectful distance and focusing on the business at hand. For Brenda, the experience was a reminder of the importance of balancing her roles as a wife, mother, and professional. Despite the fleeting emotions she sometimes felt in George's presence, she chose to prioritize her family and the life she had built with Don. "All right, George, I'm in. Let's go ahead." That evening, she informed Don about the conference she was scheduled to attend in a few weeks, ensuring it aligned with his timetable. "Don is so easygoing," Brenda mused. "He has no idea what's really going on." "Terry, how have you been?" Don called her from work 2 days after their initial meeting at the coffee shop. "I'm doing as well as can be expected. How about you?" "I'm furious. I can't believe what those 2 have been up to. I won't tolerate it anymore. I've decided to divorce Brenda." "I understand. I'm also planning to divorce George. Should we discuss this with them tonight?" "No, Terry. I have a strategy to get back at them. It looks like both of us will end up divorced, but I have a plan for a bit of revenge. Are you interested in taking revenge on George?" "Absolutely, Don. It would be great not to just be a victim in this situation. What's your plan?" Don and Terry met for coffee once more, and he explained the plan in detail. "Yes, we're going to let them go on their adult cruise, but it won't turn out the way they expect." Over the next 2 weeks, Terry and Don meticulously worked out the specifics of their scheme. The crucial day arrived, and both George and Brenda set off for their conference in Miami. On the morning of the departure, Brenda was nearly ready to leave when Don approached her. "Brenda, I've loved you for 10 years, and I cherish our life and our 2 wonderful children. I commit myself fully to this marriage and trust you do the same." Brenda found Don's demeanor odd, but she was preoccupied with the anxiety of potentially missing her flight. "Of course, Don. I love you with all my heart." Don maintained eye contact with her. The sincerity of his words seemed lost on Brenda. He saw her for what she had become, a deceitful, unfaithful person who showed little regard for their marriage, her family, or him as a husband. What a selfish bitch, Don thought to himself. Yet he chose to give her another chance. "Brenda, maybe you should cancel this conference and stay home with the kids and me. Since your presence isn't expected at work, we could take the kids to Fun World and make it a family outing. What do you think, Brenda? Just us and the children?" "Don, it's too late to change plans now. I'm supposed to learn about our new accounting system," Brenda lied. "My boss would be furious if I didn't go." Don looked at her with disappointment. He knew she was lying, as she had been doing for the past year. "Fuck her," he thought, meeting her gaze. "Have a great time, Brenda." George and Brenda were aboard their cruise ship, waiting for departure. Brenda called Don and said, "I'm at the conference hotel. It's going to be hectic for the next few days, but I'll try to call you in the evenings. I love you, Don. The call was brief, and Don assumed they were eager to get to their cabin and start their passionate time together. Unbeknownst to George and Brenda, two private investigators were already surveilling them and taking photographs. Within a few hours, these images were being sent back to Don and Terry from the ship. The following day, George and Brenda were relaxing by the pool. The sun was shining warmly, and they appeared to be enjoying each other's company. Unbeknownst to them, Don was setting his plan into motion. Don contacted Terry and informed her it was time to temporarily disable George's cell phone. Since they shared a phone plan, the service for both George and Brenda's phones was easily suspended by the phone company. "Let the games begin!" Don exclaimed. He accessed Brenda's Facebook account without difficulty, as she used the same password for most of her personal profiles. Don then uploaded pictures of Brenda and George by the pool, ensuring they were appropriate and only suggested closeness without any inappropriate implications. Along with the images, Don posted the following message. Facebook. Post. I have loved Don, and he has been a wonderful husband and father, but I have decided to take a lover. I don't care if Don divorces me. As you can see, my new guy is quite attractive, and we are on a cruise this week. What do you think? Isn't he a hunk? Plus, he is a VP at the company where I work, so I'm moving up from that old Don guy. In fact, I think I've already forgotten about him. I'll try to post more pics tomorrow. Don began a countdown. 3, 2, 1, and then he sent the post. Watching the reactions over the next few hours was entertaining. Friends responded to Brenda's page with confusion and accusations of her being crazy, questioning how she could do this to Don. Many simply unfriended her in response to the post. Everything was unfolding exactly as Don had planned. He wasn't sure how long it would take for someone to find a way to reach Brenda, but with her phone disabled, it would be difficult. A few hours later, Don received a call from Brenda's sister, Carla. Don had always gotten along well with Carla. "Hi, what's up, Carla?" he answered. "No, I haven't heard from Brenda since last night. She's at a conference in Florida. No, I haven't heard anything unusual. Is everything okay? Should I be worried? Okay, I'll let her know you called. Yes, I expect her to call this evening. All right, bye." Carla mentioned she would contact Brenda and then get back to Don. Don texted Terry, informing her that he had made the initial post on Brenda's Facebook account. "Go take a look," he suggested, including a link to her page. Don then turned off his phone and went to bed. When Don woke up the next morning, he got the children ready for school and then checked his phone. Carla had left a message saying she couldn't reach Brenda and asked if he had heard from her. Additionally, Brenda had sent a text from an unfamiliar number explaining that her phone was dead and she had borrowed a colleague's device. She mentioned she would try to get in touch again the following evening after her conference activities were over. This indicated to Don that Brenda was unaware of the situation back home. Later that afternoon, Don received a message from the PI team informing him that George and Brenda had left the ship and were now at a beach. Accompanying the message were several pictures. Don felt a grim satisfaction, knowing he had more evidence for his case. Just as Don arrived home from work, he received additional updates about the pair spending time together on the beach. The PI team had documented their interactions, and Don stored the evidence in a cloud account he had set up earlier for legal purposes. Don viewed the updates uploaded by the PIs. Although it was difficult for him emotionally, the evidence confirmed Brenda's infidelity. This was deeply painful for Don, but it solidified his decision to move forward. He uploaded some of the photos, ensuring to remove any inappropriate or overly personal details, and prepared a statement for Brenda's Facebook account. Facebook post. Why is everyone so angry? George, my new companion, is a kind man. A girl has the right to be happy, doesn't she? I'll be sharing more about my journey soon. Life is too short not to follow your heart. End of Facebook post. Don knew the post would provoke strong reactions, but he felt it was a necessary step to hold Brenda accountable for her actions. Within an hour, Carla called Don. Oh my God, Don. Brenda has completely lost it. I assume you've seen her Facebook posts by now? Yes, Carla, I saw them this morning. Why didn't you inform me about what happened last night? I wasn't sure what was actually going on. I couldn't believe Brenda had made that post. Don, have you checked her latest updates? Don wanted to be honest with Carla and explain everything, but needed more time to process. No, Carla. I chose not to look at anything else from your troublesome sister. Sorry for venting, but she has betrayed me, and I'm done with her. Don, she's uploaded more photos and shared a link to an account where she says more updates are available. Has she lost her mind? How could she do this to you? Everyone is trying to reach me because they can't contact her. No, Carla. Her phone still goes straight to voicemail. I called the cruise line, and they said there's no Brenda Primack registered on board. Do you know George's last name, Don? Apparently, she must be registered under his name. No, Carla, I don't. And I don't care either. I don't care if she never returns. If you do manage to talk to her, tell her I need to inform the kids about what's happening. I'll spare them the details and just tell them we are separating. I can't risk them finding out from someone else, and it seems like everyone already knows. Okay, Don. I'm sorry for everything. Even if she was cheating, why did she have to make it so public? Don, you're a good person. You don't deserve this. I don't understand why Brenda is acting like this. Don's phone rang again. It was Terry. My God, Don. People are talking about what's happening, and I can't believe what she's doing. Everyone at Davin Construction is discussing her posts. Brenda's social circle includes many from work, and the whole company is abuzz about their trip. About 10 of our friends have already called me with their concerns and support. Terry, we've got all the information we need, so I think we should reactivate their phones. It won't be long before they realize the situation is exposed. They might try to cover it up or just stay on the cruise. I couldn't care less. Don, do you really think we did the right thing? Their actions are now so public. I think George might even lose his job. I doubt Brenda will face consequences at work, but her reputation is already tarnished. Yes, we did the right thing. They made their choices and disrespected us. Their friends and family now see them for who they truly are. We didn't force them to behave this way. We just revealed the truth. Terry, you're a wonderful person. You've been dedicated to your family. My advice is to get a good lawyer and start the paperwork. I'm meeting with my lawyers tomorrow. I've already started the process, Don. I've talked to them, and they're preparing the initial documents. Good for you, Terry. It's hard, but moving on is the best choice. That evening, after tucking the children into bed, Don settled in to watch Sports Center while enjoying his second perfectly sweet rum and Coke. His phone rang. It was Brenda. Don let it go to voicemail. For the next 2 hours, Brenda called him approximately every 15 minutes. It seemed she was leaving voicemails too, as Don noticed the number of missed messages increasing. She realizes the deal is over, he mused, then turned his phone off. Don lay awake in bed, unable to sleep. He anticipated a stressful week ahead. In the morning, he would have to inform the kids that he and their mother were experiencing difficulties and that they would no longer be living together. He knew this would be one of the toughest conversations he would ever have. Preparing for their inevitable confusion and numerous questions weighed heavily on him. Terry had been right. These significant changes in his life were going to be tough. Don hoped to secure joint custody of the children. Dividing his time with them would be the most challenging aspect. He also recognized that Brenda would struggle. Despite their disagreements, she was a good mother. Although he was angry with Brenda, he still felt love for her. She was intelligent and quick-witted. They always seemed to understand each other and enjoyed their time together. He realized it was possible to both hate and love someone simultaneously. What a messed up situation, he thought. Don only wished Brenda had been more honest. He knew she craved attention, which likely made her vulnerable to mistakes. However, his perception of Brenda had drastically changed over the past few weeks. She had become distant, taking advantage of his efforts and doing as she pleased. She doesn't care about me or my feelings, Don thought. I'm just someone helping raise her kids, someone to assist around the house, maybe someone she could turn to when convenient. Looking back, Don couldn't understand why he hadn't noticed sooner. Had he been blinded by love for a decade? How could he have been so foolish? I'll never let that happen again, he resolved. I thought she was the person I would grow old with. What a fantasy. I was an idiot. Meanwhile, Brenda's phone had been left on the counter in their cabin, charging, and had been silent for the past 3 days. Shortly after the cruise began its journey back to the States, the phone started buzzing with notifications. She picked it up, realizing it was active again. What the heck? Brenda exclaimed. I have 23 messages. Both Brenda and George knew this wasn't good news. What's going on, Brenda? Why do you have so many messages? Oh my God. I hope nothing has happened to the kids. Brenda began to panic. Many of the messages were from her sister, but none were from Don. Unsure of what to do, she pressed a button to call Carla. What is going on there? Carla's first words were harsh. How could you post that nonsense on your Facebook page? Have you lost your mind? Brenda was completely confused. Why is Carla so angry? What did I post on my Facebook page? That nonsense about you being on a cruise with George. How could you do this to Don, and what about your kids? Brenda was shocked. Her legs felt weak as she stumbled back and sat on the small couch in their room. She couldn't speak, and George noticed her reaction. Brenda tried to respond, but no words came out. Brenda, are you still there? What is happening? Carla, how do you know about George and the cruise? Brenda was still trying to process Carla's accusations. You posted all that stuff on your Facebook page, including pictures of you two together. It's all over your account. Carla, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't posted anything on Facebook in days. And I assume you're not on a cruise with George either, right? Oh my God, how do you know that, Carla? Because it's all over your Facebook page. It's been shared everywhere. Brenda's phone slipped from her grip and landed on the floor with a thud. She simply stared at it. George watched her, puzzled. What the hell is happening, Brenda? Brenda was mute, her eyes fixed on the phone. She couldn't lift it. It felt as heavy and unyielding as molten lava. Carla's voice was still audible in the background. After a moment, she managed to pick up the phone again and held it to her ear. You need to take that page down immediately and get your ass back here. We're on our way back now, but we won't arrive in Miami until tomorrow morning. My flight won't get me home until tomorrow evening. We'll get that shit removed, and you better figure out what you're going to tell everyone. How could you do this? Brenda. Brenda was shocked and struggled to comprehend Carla's words. Okay, let me log into Facebook and see what's going on. Call me once you do, and you better contact Don, though I don't know what you're going to say. Bye. Brenda ended the call. Brenda took down her Facebook page but didn't know how to deactivate her cloud account. What she discovered there was unbelievable. Who had taken those photos? How did that crap end up on her account? Clearly, someone had hacked it. But how would a hacker know about her, George, and the cruise? And where did those damn pictures originate? This so-called hacker had also added outrageous comments to the posts, clearly trying to portray her as a girl of easy virtue. In reality, it does make me look like a girl of easy virtue, Brenda mused, and it makes me seem so heartless and disrespectful to Dawn and our marriage. She glanced at her friends list, which had dwindled to fewer than 75. More than half of her previous friends had unfriended her. Oh my God, everyone now thinks I'm some kind of cruel, evil person, and they all hate me. Brenda assumed the remaining 75 friends simply hadn't visited her Facebook account yet. My life is destroyed. What about Don and the kids? Don must know. Why hasn't he left any messages? He must despise me for what I've done. How am I ever going to fix this? And everyone at Davin Construction probably knows I'm having an affair with George, the VP of marketing. God, both of their lives are falling apart. George looked disheartened. He had connected the dots. Someone's been watching us, Brenda. Don must have discovered what we were doing and hired a private investigator. He's the one who hacked your account and posted those pictures. No, George, that can't be. He would have to hate me so much to ruin me in front of all my friends and family. He's not that cruel. Brenda, think about it. How else could those pictures have appeared on your page? And he knew about me. The posts mentioned me as the vice president of marketing. He knows many of your friends work with us, and he knew the information would reach Terry. I'm afraid we're both in deep trouble. Brenda sat in stunned silence. Don must have found out, and, in his anger, tried to destroy me. He's done a pretty good job, she thought. Both she and George are likely out of jobs, and all her friends know she was cheating on her husband. And what about her kids? She hoped they wouldn't be too hurt by the fallout. Now they were stranded on that damned boat, waiting for it to slowly return to the States. The cruise had turned into a nightmare. This is going to be the longest 24 hours of my life, both thought. It felt like the ship was steering them toward their shared doom. They spent most of the evening in their room, barely speaking and only leaving to go to the buffet for dinner. George! How could Don do something like this? Well, you were on a cruise sleeping with another man, George replied dejectedly. I just hope by some miracle Terry hasn't found out. Fuck you, George. What about my marriage? Many of my social friends work at Davin Construction. The whole damn company must know, and so does Terry. Do you think we'll lose our jobs? I don't know, Brenda. I don't even want to think about that right now. George was numb at Brenda's words. He just sat there with a blank expression and didn't respond. They both knew what awaited them upon their return. Their lives were collapsing, and they had to endure as the boat made its slow journey back to Miami. George, I don't want to, but I have to call Don. I need to tell him this was all a mistake and find out if he was the one who posted that crap. Brenda tried repeatedly that evening to call Don, but he didn't answer. She attempted again the next morning but assumed he was avoiding her. To her surprise, he answered on the second ring. Hello, Brenda. How is your conference going? Don, you know damn well I'm not at a conference. I know you saw my Facebook page. In fact, you posted that crap, didn't you? How the hell could you do that? Brenda was so angry she was gritting her teeth. Click. Don had hung up. Brenda tried calling back, but he didn't answer. She kept trying, and about 15 minutes later, he finally picked up again. Listen, Brenda, I don't care how that mess ended up on your page. What I want to discuss is you leaving me and the kids while you go on some trip and spend time with someone else. Brenda didn't know how to respond. She knew if she mentioned the situation again, he would hang up. Her frustration faded as she considered her next words. Don, I am so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't care about him, and I don't want us to fall apart. Brenda, I don't care what you need. What I need is to understand how you could do that to your family. What made you think that behavior was acceptable? Don could hear her crying. Brenda, I don't need to hear you cry. I need you to explain why you did what you did. Brenda could only sob. Oh my God, Don. Oh my God. Her words were hard to comprehend, but he could sense she was trying to find a way to fix things. Brenda, just come home, and we'll figure this out. Don knew he was lying. He realized the only option was divorce, but for some reason he was trying to make it slightly easier for her. Okay, Don. I'm so sorry. I do love you. I know we can find a way to fix this. Bye, Brenda. See you soon. Don hung up. George's attempt to reach out to Terry didn't go much smoother. She was fully aware of everything. In reality, she had been the one to hire the private detectives and was involved in the Facebook scheme. George understood that confronting her might jeopardize his job, but he couldn't harbor anger towards Terry. He recognized the deep pain he had caused her and only wished to make amends and preserve his family. I can't find the right words to express how sorry I am, Terry, he said. I messed this up terribly, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make things right with you. It hadn't fully registered with George that Terry was already on the path to divorce. I love you, Terry. I'll somehow find a way to fix this. Terry ended the call abruptly. George felt it was kind of her not to prolong the conversation. He thought they could discuss everything once he returned home. A day later, George and Brenda were passing through the final security checkpoint and making their way to the baggage claim area. Numerous well-dressed drivers stood away from the exit, each holding small signs with passengers' names. George and Brenda weren't paying much attention to them when two men, also in sharp suits, emerged from the crowd. George looked at them with confusion, realizing he hadn't arranged for a limousine to pick them up. Are you George Carlson? One man asked. The other turned to Brenda. Are you Brenda Primack? Both nodded, still somewhat puzzled. At the same time, the two men reached into their leather cases, pulled out sizable envelopes, and handed them to George and Brenda. You've been served, they declared in unison. Brenda's story. Oh my God. What an absolute nightmare. Trapped on that ship while my world collapses around me. I was standing on the balcony of my cabin, next to the railing, gazing out over the ocean. I could see we were moving, noticing the wake as the cruise ship sliced through the water, yet it still felt like we were stationary. This damn boat is going to take forever to get back to Miami. It's still hard to accept that Don not only discovered my affair, but also exposed it to everyone online. I always cherished Facebook and my social connections, but Don turned it against me to seek revenge for my betrayal. He made me appear like a complete girl of easy virtue who didn't care about her husband and family. I know cheating was wrong, but it was just an adventure. I still loved Don and our kids. George and I had been followed by private investigators who took secret photos and even a video of us in the most compromising situations. And that message Don posted on Facebook, making it seem like I had written it myself. It made me look like a heartless bitch. How could I have been so foolish? I reflected on what George and I had been doing over the past year. We had intimacy almost every week and connected during a couple of business trips. What was I thinking? How did I honestly believe Don wouldn't find out? First, George seduces me. Then we start sleeping together, go on business trips, and finally, this stupid cruise. I looked down at the water again. Same water, same wake. It still felt like the boat wasn't moving. Now I was confined to this room with the last person I wanted to see. George. Ah. I knew this nightmare was just beginning. I knew it would hit me hard when I got home, but I desperately wanted to return. This slow trip back was torturing me. Although it was challenging to think clearly, I knew I had to use this time wisely to plan what I would say to Don and how I could save my marriage. God, Don must be furious. He posted that crap on Facebook and now everyone knows. That bastard should have confronted me directly. He clearly knew what was happening. He should have prevented me from taking this ridiculous trip. Instead, he hired a private investigator to follow me and gather evidence. He just wanted to show me he was in control and to get back at me for what I had done. Damn, I wanted to kill him, but my thoughts kept returning to the reality of my actions. My foolish behavior wasn't Don's fault. Discovering my affair must have been devastating for him. Now I needed to go home and fix the damage. I had to remove that crap from Facebook and ensure Don understands this was all a big mistake. I need to convince him that this would never happen again. I know it will take a long time to repair the damage, but I'm willing to endure it because I love Don and want to keep our family together. But this nightmare was even worse than just the damage to my marriage. Everyone knows. Family, friends, everyone. What am I going to tell them? There's not much I can do to explain my actions, but I want them to know I didn't post that stuff. And here I am, stuck on this cruise ship. My life feels like a slow-motion disaster. The cruise ship finally inched back to Miami, and we grabbed our luggage and headed to the airport. I tried calling Don again, but it went straight to voicemail. What time does the flight arrive, George? We had barely spoken in the past few hours, both lost in our thoughts and just doing what we needed to do to get back home. I don't think either of us wanted to discuss the overwhelming sense of dread surrounding our lives. I so wanted to be home, but the closer we got, the more I dreaded what was to come. Do you think your marriage will survive this, George? Yeah, I think so. It's the only time I've ever cheated on Terry. When he said the word cheated, I realized how awful it sounded. I had previously thought of my actions as just some casual intimacy, maybe even calling it an affair. But cheating? Yeah, I was a cheater. I had cheated, and there was no undoing that. I'm not sure my marriage will survive. Oh, I think Don will give me a chance, but he's not the type of person to get over things easily. Hell, he's still angry at his older brother for pursuing his girlfriend in high school. We have to hope for the best, Brenda. I know I will do everything in my power to hold on to Terry. So, I guess that means you and I are through? George's head turned quickly, and he looked into my eyes with a shocked expression. Then he saw I wasn't serious, and relief washed over his face. We both tried to laugh about it, but neither of us was in the mood, so our conversation fizzled out again. I was abruptly awakened as our plane began its descent. Typically, I don't sleep during flights, but the stress of the last day and a half had left me completely drained. When George and I stood up to retrieve our bags from the overhead compartment, we simply locked eyes. It felt as though we had reached our moment of truth, and there was little left to discuss. Brenda, I genuinely hope the next few days go smoothly for you, or at least as well as possible. Try to show Don that you still love him and maybe you can mend things. That's what I'm planning to do with Terry. It's the first time for both of us, so hopefully our spouses can forgive us. Looking into George's eyes, I found myself speechless. My vision blurred, and tears began to stream down my cheeks. I just don't know how I can face him. He knows what we did, and I've hurt such a good man. It frustrates me that he had to expose us to everyone, but maybe I would have done the same if given the chance. He probably did exactly what I would have done in the same situation. We can't hold them responsible for our mistakes. My advice is to avoid mentioning the Facebook posts. You can't blame him for anything. Just focus on repairing your marriage. The plane had cleared out of passengers in front of us, and we walked down the aisle and off the aircraft. As we left the terminal and descended the escalator towards baggage claim, all the transportation drivers were holding up their signs for business travelers. Neither George nor I paid them any attention since we both had cars parked at the airport. Suddenly, a few men called out our names, confusing me. Did Don send someone to pick me up? As they approached, they verified our identities and handed each of us an envelope. "You have been served," they said almost at the same time. I stared blankly, not understanding what they meant. As the men walked away, George looked at me with profound sadness in his eyes. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly what was happening. "They're divorcing us, Brenda. These are the divorce papers." My legs felt like they were turning to jelly, unable to support me, and I collapsed to the ground. I was numb, tears streaming down my face as I cried loudly. Concerned onlookers stared at me. After a moment, I looked up to see George no longer there, slowly walking away down the hallway. 45 minutes later, I had retrieved my car and was driving straight home. I texted Don to let him know I was on my way, assuming he needed to prepare just as I was. Earlier, George had advised me to try to save my marriage. But now it seemed Don was set on divorce. However, I still believed there might be a chance, so I was determined to do everything I could to prevent it from being too late. I barely recall the drive home. My mind was racing, unable to form a clear plan. All I knew was that I needed to get back and talk to Don. After enduring the long wait on the return trip, I was finally on my street. It was early evening, but the sun was still up. Don always parked his car in the garage, so I couldn't tell if anyone was home. It felt like Judgment Day was approaching, and a wave of nausea hit me. Maybe he had changed the locks and wouldn't let me in. I didn't know what awaited me, but I had finally arrived home. As I reached the door, I paused and listened, hearing nothing from inside. I grabbed the knob and twisted. It was locked. Was he right? Had he changed the locks to keep me out? I inserted my key, and it turned easily. I pushed the door open and immediately sensed that no one was home. In the evening light, the house was dark. No Don, no kids rushing to welcome me. I pulled in my luggage and turned on the hallway light. "Hello? Is anybody home?" My voice echoed in the silent house. "Fouquet, they're not here," I muttered to myself. Leaving my luggage at the door, I began to walk around. Everything seemed in place, but the silence made me uneasy. At least Don hadn't packed up and left me yet. I headed upstairs towards our bedroom. Upon reaching the kids' room, I turned to look inside. The beds were unmade, and toys were scattered across the floor. I had prioritized my selfish desires over my family, and now I might have lost everything. Seeing the children's room with toys strewn about, Chelsea's pink blankets, and Trevor's Transformers sheet felt surreal. Could I really be losing my family? Was I no longer welcome here? My legs gave out again, and I grabbed the door frame for support, overwhelmed by sobs once more. I don't know how long I stood there crying, but eventually, I realized I needed to check if Don had left with the kids. Maybe he took them to his parents' house and then left with his things. I walked down the hall into our bedroom. Everything seemed undisturbed. Don hadn't taken any of his clothes. A flicker of hope arose, suggesting this might be a positive sign. I finally descended the stairs and entered the kitchen. I hadn't eaten much in the past 2 days and thought some food might help clear my mind. On the table was a folded note from Don. At least now I would understand what was happening. The note was brief and straightforward. Don wrote that he and the kids were at his parents' house. Tomorrow was Sunday, and he said he would come over in the morning to talk. Then I could see the kids in the afternoon. Oh my God. I had to wait even longer. Why was Don doing this to me? It felt like this punishment would never end, though deep down I knew it was just beginning. I knew our conversation would be painful, but I was determined to let him know that I still loved him. I had never stopped loving Don, but somehow I had gotten entangled in George's schemes. I realized I had to remove that crap from Facebook, so I headed to our home office and accessed my account. Seeing Don's posts, which made it appear as though I had written them, left me feeling devastated. I was aware that I had hurt him, but damn, his posts had nearly ruined me. They portrayed me as a completely indifferent girl of easy virtue. I took down the post and decided it was necessary to provide an explanation. Facebook post. I just wanted everyone to know that I didn't create the recent posts you might have seen from me. My account was hacked. Yes, I've done something terrible. I did have an affair with a man, and I'm not proud of it, but I certainly didn't share the proof for everyone to see. I'm sorry you had to witness it. End of Facebook post. I logged off the computer and climbed back upstairs to my bedroom. I didn't even have the energy to haul my luggage up with me. I collapsed onto the bed, still dressed, and began to cry again until, somehow, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning I woke up still dressed, but had managed to get under the covers during the night. The clock read only 7 a.m., but I wasn't sure when Don was arriving, so I forced myself out of bed. It was then I noticed I was still wearing yesterday's clothes. I changed and headed to the bathroom. Everything felt odd, being alone in my house, showering in an empty home on a Sunday morning. The overwhelming sense that I had messed up my life came back, but this time I wasn't crying. Instead, I was more stunned that Don would be arriving soon, and I had no idea what I was going to say, or, more importantly, what he would say. Would he even consider not divorcing me? I realized I hadn't yet looked at the papers he had served me. What were his conditions? I needed to at least go through them before he arrived. That thought gave me a reason to start my day. After showering, I went down to the kitchen and made some coffee and toast. Butter and strawberry jam on my toast had always been my favorite, and since I hadn't eaten much last night, I almost devoured the food. I took out the papers and began to examine what might lie ahead for my life. I'm no lawyer, and the documents were filled with complex legal jargon, but it seemed he was seeking joint 50-50 custody of our children. We would divide the proceeds from the house equally. This is what our 9-year marriage had come down to, I suppose. It felt like I was reading my own obituary. I knew I had to find a way to slow down Don's relentless push somehow. I would likely need a lawyer to review these papers. As I began to examine them more closely, I heard Don entering through the front door. I leaned back from the table and hurried to the living room. Don, you're here. I couldn't think of anything else to say. We just stared at each other as I approached him and opened my arms, longing for a hug. I had never needed a hug from anyone more in my life. He looked at me with a blank expression and remained silent. As I got closer, he extended his arm and gestured for me to stop. The hug wasn't happening. I stopped about 3 feet away, met his gaze, and started to cry. Don, I am so very sorry for what has happened. His expression was something I couldn't comprehend. He seemed upset, but more so confused. What did he expect me to say? Did he think I didn't still care about him? I felt terrible. I had shattered his world. I felt like the lowest person on earth. I had hurt a good man, and now he was here, unsure how to handle the situation. I stood there, looking at the man who had been by my side for years, but I couldn't hold any resentment toward him. I was the one who had ruined everything, and I needed to find a way to fix it. Don, say something. Tell me how badly I messed up. But please, just talk to me. Brenda, how could you just throw our marriage away? I thought you cared about me. He paused, staring into my eyes with genuine confusion. He was asking questions and expected real answers, but I didn't know how to respond. "I'm so sorry, Don." "What about me?" he asked. "I thought you cared, and it never crossed my mind that you would betray me. I mean, never. I thought we had something great." I stood frozen and then blurted out, "I don't know, Don." I wish I could give you answers, but somehow I let things spiral out of control. I didn't feel like I needed anyone else, but when someone started showing me attention, I got caught up in the feeling. I let it go way too far. Yeah, Brenda. That's putting it lightly. You've torn apart our marriage. I mean, what was going through your head? Did you even think about the kids? Now they're going to grow up in 2 different homes. Oh my gosh, Don. Please, you have to reconsider. Please don't end this. I never had feelings for anyone else. It was just me being foolish. I don't want a divorce. I care about you and promise, with all my heart, to make this right. Could you please just delay the divorce and let me prove that I can change? Please, if you can't do it for me, do it for the kids. I don't think I can do this anymore, Brenda. You need to gather your things and leave. I'll bring the kids over this afternoon. You can stay with them tonight and sleep on the couch. Tomorrow, after I go to work, you need to pack what you need and be gone before I return. No. Please, Don. Don't make me leave. Tears were streaming down my face and my voice was shaking. I'm so sorry, Don. Please give us another chance. I had been looking down, my eyes swollen with tears. When I looked up, he was at the door and then gone. I collapsed onto the couch and continued to cry. About an hour later, Don returned with the kids. They were thrilled to see me and rushed into my arms. I hugged them tightly and looked up at Don with sorrowful eyes. He just stared blankly at me and walked past us into our home office. I tried not to cry, but the kids noticed I was upset. I hugged them again, not wanting to let go, then realized it might be upsetting them. I had to pull myself together for the sake of the kids. I prepared dinner, and we cuddled on the couch watching TV. Around 9 p.m., I put them to bed. I didn't see Don the entire evening until about 10 p.m., when he walked from our office to the bedroom. I heard the alarm on my phone ringing, and it took me a moment to realize I was on the couch. To my surprise, I had slept soundly and felt refreshed. Getting the kids ready for school, I prepared their cereal and made some coffee. They ate happily, and I went up to our bedroom. As I expected, Don was gone. He had placed 2 of our large suitcases on the bed. So thoughtful of him. I drove the kids to school and returned home. Maybe I wouldn't pack and leave. After all, this is my house, too. But I realized I needed to give Don his space. I would let him take the lead. I would continue to show him that I still cared and that we needed to raise the kids together. I knew he still cared despite all the pain I had caused. We just needed some time, and I was sure his heart would soften. I called my sister. She was still single and living alone. "Brenda, what's going on? Are you back in town?" "Yeah, I got back yesterday. Don didn't waste any time. Carla. He had me served at the airport. I still think we can work things out, but he's very, very upset. He wants me out of the house. Can I stay with you for a while?" "Sure, I suppose," she answered hesitantly, leaving me to wonder whether my sister resented me for my actions. I didn't believe she genuinely hated me, but maybe she was just not fond of me at that moment. "Thanks, Carla. I'll come over after work, provided I still have a job." I was taken aback when I entered the workplace. I couldn't quite pinpoint my expectations, but everything seemed normal except for the sideways looks and outright stares from many of my colleagues. The day was fairly productive. I had numerous emails to address and needed to reconnect with several partners who had left messages. During lunch, I preferred solitude, so I drove to a fast food restaurant and ate by myself. Throughout the day, I anticipated my phone would ring, summoning me to my boss's office, but that never happened. I saw him around mid-afternoon during a status meeting. Once it concluded, he glanced at me and inquired if I was catching up after being away last week, then mentioned we had a substantial amount of work to complete later in the week in preparation for an important partnership proposal that was nearly finalized. What on earth? They weren't planning to fire me? It didn't seem like they were even going to discuss anything with me. Everyone knew about what had happened between George and me, and it didn't make sense that they wouldn't at least reprimand me. Later in the week, when I finally spoke with George, he revealed that they had reached an agreement. Neither of us would be fired. He was giving up his annual bonus and was placed on a 1-year probation. They weren't taking any action against me because they feared I might sue for intimacy harassment. It appeared they just wanted the matter to disappear as quickly as possible. George also mentioned that he and Terry were attempting to reconcile. Since it was his first time cheating, she was willing to give him another chance. Terry was postponing the divorce while they attended counseling. Good for you, George. I wish Don were in such a forgiving mood. He's not even speaking to me. Don provided me with his attorney's number and essentially refused to communicate with me after our initial conversation. A few days after my return, I moved many of my belongings to my sister's place. I hoped that by giving Don some space and showing him I wasn't trying to control the situation, he might soften and begin talking to me. During the week, I took my children out to dinner. We went to a McDonald's with a playground and they had fun on the slides and climbing net. As I watched them, the weight of the situation overwhelmed me, and I felt tears welling up. I needed to stay strong for my kids. When we returned home later, we walked to the door. I stood in the foyer, kissing and hugging them. I could tell they were confused, thinking I was coming back to stay. As I brushed Chelsea's hair and tried to explain, "Your dad and I are having an argument, and I'm staying at Aunt Carla's for a few days." I looked up to see Dawn standing in the living room. "I love you guys, and hope to be back by next week." Chelsea and Trevor looked at me, sensing my sadness, which was reflected in their eyes as well. "Be good for your dad, and I'll see you soon. Now go upstairs and get ready for bed." They glanced at their dad and went upstairs. "Brenda, you shouldn't give them false hope. You're not going to be back here next week." "Dawn, I know I messed up badly. I understand you're hurt and angry, but please, don't ruin everything over this. I made a mistake, but I promise it won't happen again." I struggled to stay composed, feeling my eyes start to water. "I promise." Don interrupted me as he walked toward the door. "Brenda, you had an ongoing affair for over a year. You disrespected me and clearly didn't care about our marriage. Your actions showed me everything I needed to know." He opened the door, signaling for me to leave. Once more, I reminded myself that I needed to give him time and space, so I walked out without saying anything. I realized I needed to talk to my parents and persuaded Carla to join me for a visit. She spoke with them, and we arranged to have dinner at their house on Friday. My parents had always trusted me. I had always been the sensible one, even during my teenage years. As I recounted what had happened, I noticed the disappointment in their eyes. I think they expected me to reveal something terrible about Don, like he had mistreated or neglected me, but I had nothing to say in that regard. By the time I finished my story, I was crying and trying to maintain my composure. Normally, my parents would do anything to ease my pain, but that night they just looked at me with confusion. I understood their reaction. How could they comfort me? What would they say? "Brenda, it's okay. Everything will be all right." No, they couldn't utter those words. Finally, my mom approached and hugged me. "We love you, Brenda. We just hope Don can find a way to forgive you." I located and consulted a lawyer the subsequent week. I required legal representation, even if just to show Don that I was taking the matter seriously. After our attorneys discussed the situation, Don became very flexible regarding the children. I was granted custody on weekends and Wednesday evenings. During those Wednesdays, I could stay with the kids at their home. Don would leave and return after they were asleep. We agreed to this setup, but Don remained as distant as ever, communicating only when necessary. During my Wednesday visits, I started preparing large meals for the children that they could eat over several days. This made me feel like a part of the family again, and I began to enjoy these evenings. A few weeks into the arrangement, I walked into the house one Wednesday. Typically, Don would just greet me and linger briefly to ensure everything was in order. "Brenda, we appreciate you making these big meals for us." Hearing him speak to me again was wonderful. "Of course, Don. Do you have any requests? What would you like me to cook next week? I'm happy to prepare anything you prefer." I smiled, noticing that Don suddenly seemed uneasy. "Whatever the kids want is fine." In the following weeks, it seemed that giving Don space was effective. I realized he was enjoying the leftover meals from Wednesdays, and I also started doing the laundry. Folding his clothes and organizing his drawer made me feel even more connected. One evening, I wrote a note expressing how much I enjoyed doing these things for him and the kids. I placed the note on top of his underwear in the drawer, knowing he would find it. I hoped he would acknowledge it when I picked up the children on Saturday, but he never brought it up. Nevertheless, I sensed he was becoming more receptive. Occasionally, we began discussing the children and other matters when he returned late on Wednesday nights. I felt our conversations were becoming less tense. This continued for a few months. I instructed my lawyer to proceed slowly with the divorce, but to avoid making it clear that we were delaying. There was a 90-day waiting period, and my intention was to have this ordeal resolved well before then. Don didn't appear to be rushing the divorce, which I planned to leverage to my benefit. About a month later, I decided to escalate things. The following Wednesday, I wore more revealing clothing and applied makeup. As Don was leaving that evening, I told him I wanted to speak with him when he got back, and that I had a surprise for him. I smiled and met his gaze. I could tell he was unsure how to respond to my comment, but as I had intended, he didn't question me. I simply aimed to plant a seed and make him curious about my intentions. When Don returned home that evening, he seemed uneasy. "What did you want to discuss, Brenda?" "Oh, I didn't really want to have a long conversation. I just wanted to give you something." I smiled warmly, meeting his gaze. Don appeared curious as I handed him a small box. "Don, you didn't think I'd forget your birthday, did you?" "Brenda, you really shouldn't have." "Don, you're still my husband, at least for now. Please accept this gift." He smiled and took the box, opening it to reveal a stylish Omega Seamaster watch. I knew he appreciated quality timepieces, and this one suited his taste perfectly. "Thank you, Brenda," he said, his voice softer. "Now." I stepped closer, hoping the moment would allow us to reconnect, even briefly. "There's something else I want to say, Don." He looked at me expectantly. "I've missed you so much these past few months. I miss the way we used to talk, laugh, and share moments." His expression softened, and I felt a glimmer of hope. "Brenda, it's not that simple," he said quietly. "I know," I admitted, "but maybe we could start somewhere. Tonight, I just want to celebrate your birthday and remember the good times." We spent the evening reminiscing about our years together. The tension slowly gave way to warmth, a feeling I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time, rebuilding what we had lost seemed possible. As the night went on, Don appeared more relaxed. His genuine smile reminded me of what I had missed. "Brenda, I appreciate this," he said. I replied earnestly, "I want us to move forward." Don nodded cautiously. "We'll see." When the evening ended, I walked him to the door. "Happy birthday, Don. Please think about what I said." He promised he would. Watching him leave, I felt cautiously optimistic. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. I slept in our bed that night, hoping he might join me, but he didn't. The next morning, I found him returning home, visibly exhausted. "Don, where were you?" I asked. He admitted spending the night in his car. I panicked. It was too much to handle, he confessed. I encouraged him to rest, assuring him we'd talk after he showered. When he returned, his expression was serious. "Brenda, I can't do this anymore. I've been lost without you, but your affair shattered my trust. Even if we tried to reconcile, it would take years, and it might still fail." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized this was the end. Don and I both cried, standing together in silence. Then, he handed me my car keys and gently guided me to the door. As I stepped outside, I turned to him. We shared a long, sorrowful look before he closed the door. It was over. 1 year later. Facebook post. "Dear friends and family, not long ago, I had a wonderful life, a loving husband, great kids, and a beautiful home. Today, much of that is gone. While my children remain healthy, I no longer see them every day. My husband, Don, has divorced me, and relationships with family and friends are strained. I take full responsibility. I made a selfish decision and betrayed Don's trust by having an affair. I deeply regret my actions. To everyone I've hurt, I am truly sorry. This experience has humbled me, and I am seeking forgiveness. Let my mistake serve as a warning. Poor choices can destroy what you hold dear. Chelsea, Trevor, Don, I love you all." End of Facebook post. The next morning, I logged onto Facebook to find numerous supportive comments. Then I saw it, a friend request from Don. While I knew we could never be a couple again, being friends was a small but meaningful step forward.